Today we are going to learn a new method to solve quadratics, and this is a method called using square roots, and it's pretty much only used when we only have an x squared term and a constant, and that's what we have on all of these problems. And so what this is leading up to, though, is solving a quadratic with three terms, a trinomial, using a method called completing the square, which we'll learn the next day. So let's take a look at this first problem. The whole idea when we're using square roots is we have to solve for the unknown. So in this case, we're solving for x for all of these problems in this case. So that's the thing, is to get the x squared term by itself. So actually I'm going to write solve for x squared. Get x squared by itself, and then from there we'll be able to use the square roots. And so we'll go ahead and move this 3 over. The way we do it is just dividing by 3. And here's what we have left. X squared equals, now 3 I know goes into this number because 1 plus 0 plus 8 makes 9, and 3 goes into 9. So let's see how many times. 3 goes into 10 3 times, with 1 left over, so I put the 1 right up here. And think of 3 into 18 goes 6 times. Well, we're not done. We still need to find x. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to use these square roots. And so what we'll do is we'll take the square root of both sides. As long as you take the square root of one side, you got to take the square root of the other side, and you've kept this in balance. And so when we do that, the square root of x squared is just x. And now we have two numbers that could make 36. See, again, the two numbers that multiply together to equal 36. You see, negative 6 times negative 6 equals 36, and a positive 6 times positive 6 equals 36. So we have both answers. So we need to represent it as both. We don't know which one they have is the one they want, so we'll use both. So x equals either positive 6 or negative 6, so plus or minus 6. So one's called the principal square root, one's called the negative square root. And we have the plus is the principal, the negative is the negative square root, obviously. And so for this next one, the same sort of thing. You always get x squared by itself. Difference here is that we have the x squared term on the other side. But no fear, we do it the same way. When you divide 4 into 100, you get 25 equals x squared. So from that point, all you're going to do is take the square root of both sides, and you'll have your answer. So square root of x squared is x, but again, there's two numbers that could multiply to make 25, either negative 5 or positive 5. And so we have to write both of them. So it's going to end up being plus or minus 5. So let's take a look at the next one. A little bit different. We have to get x squared by itself in a little different way by doing an opposite operation. So we're going to subtract the 7 from both sides. So when I do that, I'm left with 64 equals x squared. Well, all you're going to do from there is just take the square root. Square root of both sides will get you your answer. So here we're left with x equals plus or minus 8. Well, taking a look at the next one, we've got two steps involved in this problem because first of all, we need to get that x squared term by itself by adding that 64 to both sides. And when we do that, we're still not done because we have this 49x squared equals 64. Well, from that point, we'll divide by 49, and don't actually do the division. Just leave it as an improper fraction for now, and you'll see why in the next step. So let's write what we have. X squared equals 64/49. Well, way back in September, this textbook went ahead and solved some problems like this. They took square roots of 64/49. And that's what we're going to end up doing here. You see, what you do when you take the square root of a fraction is you take the square root of both the top and the bottom of the fraction separately. And when we do that, the square root of 64 is 8. The square root of 49 is 7. We've got ourselves a improper fraction. You can just leave the answer like that, but make sure you have both numbers, either positive 8/7 or negative 8/7. Both multiply together to equal positive 64/49. Well, in this one, if you have an x squared term equaling a negative, you get a no solution. But we don't have that in this case because we'll end up dividing by a negative, and that'll cancel out the negatives. So let's see what's left over. X squared equals, and then 2 goes into 16 8 times. 2 goes into 2 1 time. So we have 81. So we go ahead and do some division there. Actually, not division, but it's taking the square root of both sides, and we're left with an x equals plus or minus 9. Two numbers that multiply to make 81 are 9 times 9, or negative 9 times negative 9. Well, from that point, this one here, a little bit different. You just have to add that 121 to both sides. And when I do that, I'm now left with a 121 equals 81x squared. So you're just going to take this 81 and get rid of it by dividing by 81 on both sides. And so when I do that, now I'm left with a 121 over 81, and this all equals x squared. Well, from this point, we can go ahead and take the square root of both sides. When I do that, I'm left with x, and x equals, two numbers that make 121 would be 11. Two numbers that make 81 are 9. But remember, you can't just have 11/9. You need to have a positive 11/9 or a negative 11/9. Both multiply together to equal a positive 121 over 81. Well, in the homework tonight, you got a couple word problems. This one's a little different, but we'll go over a couple other word problems in part 2, so you might check that out. And here we have, it says the height of an acorn falling out of a tree is given by this equation. If the acorn takes 1 second to fall to the ground, what is the value of b? b represents the height of the acorn was before it fell. So we'll just write that down. Height before falling is what we're looking at here, before falling. And in this case, we are going to go ahead and substitute this 1 second in for t. And so let's go ahead and rewrite what we've got. But we also know this, the ground. What value would you give the ground? Well, we'd give the ground a value of 0. And what equals the height? Well, h represents the height. So we're going to say 0 equals the height. And 1 second goes in for t. So let's rewrite this. 0 equals negative 16 times by 1 second squared plus b. So from that point, all you're going to do is square the 1, and you end up with 1 times by negative 16 just gives us negative 16 equals 0 and then plus b. Well, from that point, all you have to do is move this 16 back to the other side, and you've got your answer. So there it is. b equals 16. So 16 feet is as high up as the acorn was before it fell. Well, part 2 will go over another set of directions that you'll see that ask you to round to the nearest hundredth, so they won't be perfect squares. So we'll talk about how to do that, and then we'll also take a look at a couple word problems that you'll see on the test as well. So take a look at that.